We have we have about 70 people with us today, and I can tell I'm in South Dakota because I just did a webinar that had 22,000. So I am planning on connecting with you through the chat and for the next 2 days. Let me just tell you how Michelle and I sort of designed these 2 days, because I had the gift of being with you last year. We did the whole time on explicit instruction. And I'm hoping that we have a little outside noise. My home is right downtown in Portland, Oregon, so we might occasionally have traffic go by. And so we did it on explicit instruction, but today we're going to go deeper into it in how to polish up our practice, because so many of you, except that one new teacher I saw, have taught a number of years. So then they say, oh, yes, I use choral responses, but do you use it in a way that's like an optimum way to make your practice better? So we're going to work on polishing your practice on explicit instruction today. And then last year, we got feedback that people particularly liked specific information regarding intervention in reading and intervention for struggling writers. So tomorrow we're going to do one session on readers, and I chose to focus on particularly struggling readers who are 4th grade through 9th grade. And why? Well, we have in our federal government the Institute of Educational Science. And what they do is annually they pick out a topic that is critical to education. And they write what are called practice guides. So there's a practice guide on how to teach algebra. There is a practice guide on early reading, foundation skills. There is a practice guide that is recommendations based on research for primary reading and primary writing and middle school reading and writing. So the most recent one they wrote, which was just out for 2 months, was on what does research tell us that we should do with struggling readers who are in 4th through 9th grade? What are the research validated practices that should be embedded within our services as special educators or interventionists to that population? So that's what we're going to do, sort of a book study on that tomorrow, first part of the day. And then we are going to use rest of our morning to look at teaching students 2 critical writing skills: how to write a sentence, looking at different perspectives that you could embed within your instruction, as well as looking at paragraph writing. So explicit instruction, it goes to all classes, all content area today. And tomorrow we're going to specialize in interventions in reading and writing in general ed, as well as intervention. All right, so it is June 8th. I can't believe it's June already. And South Dakota, you're out of school already. You must get out before Memorial Day. There's many places, though, that are still in school. You are going to be reminded of, if you were with us last year or not, about the mottos that sort of overarch what we are doing. Wherever you are, if I say read with me, read out loud, because I want to embed as much active participation as possible in this webinar, because it just makes the most difference. It's one of the highest effect size teaching behaviors is opportunities to respond. So reading it with me, how well you teach equals how well they learn. And for as my 55th year as a teacher, for my whole career, this has been the motto that I've been living by. How well you teach equals how well they learn. And of course, the also the opposite is true. How well they learn equals how well you teach. So this is the relationship that we're going to emphasize, the relationship between teaching and learning. Many of you know that I wrote, and soon I'm going to be revising in about a year. I'm going to have that as my next project. But this book was written with Charles Hughes at Penn State on explicit instruction. And this line here, effective and efficient teaching, is exactly what it is all about and what we're going to spend our day on. If we look at, for example, the list of CEC, high leverage practices for teachers working with students with disabilities, at the very top of that list is explicit instruction. And so we are going to have that as our basis because it's what works. In general ed and special ed, in reading and writing and mathematics and science and social studies. Now, I have here, and we'll put this, all of the PowerPoints are available to you in case there's a slide that you want to utilize for some purpose, you're welcome to it. And we'll also put in this sheet. And you could have made it yourself, but you realize how much time it took me to get all the writing on this perfect like this. So we'll just put this as a PDF file for you to use. And it's one of the best and simplest active participation strategies. So I might walk into a fourth grade classroom and they might have these in their desk, and the teacher says, take out your response card, put it in front of you, put agree and disagree at the top. I'm going to put up a statement, we're going to read it, and then you're going to touch agree or disagree. And when I say show me, you're going to hold it up. So you are going to be able to show it to me as we're on a webinar, but I'm going to still ask you to at some point to make a piece of paper that has agree and disagree at the top. You don't have to have the whole thing, but that one part of it we'll use. So what else are we going to do in terms of active participation? Things that you can do in your classroom. And one, you need paper nearby. Today, and a lot of paper tomorrow when we do writing. And what I would like you to do is sort of to keep your own list of best practices, sort of your personal to-do list. When I go back to teaching next fall, these are some things that I want to do. So we're looking at it from a perspective of our own teaching and where we could polish it up and add something new to it. And sometimes I'm going to ask you to give a short response, a short choral response. You'll be muted, but you can talk out loud. And again, because when we are teaching a lesson and there is a response that is short and there's a response that is the same, there's no reason we couldn't ask everyone to say the answer. Sometimes I will say, read this with me, and we'll do choral reading. Now, again, that's a practice that could be infused in many of our lessons where students may have previewed something silently, and then we say, let's read it together. I have to watch myself because I make one of the most consistent errors on choral reading in that I read too fast. We need to read at a moderate rate with appropriate expression or prosody as we have students read with us. But better than calling on individuals because it increases the amount of actual reading that students do. Well, sometimes I'm going to use close reading where I read, stop, and you say the next word. This is a practice that we field tested in middle school classes. And the reason we did that was we wanted to see if students would be more on task when We did choral reading or closed reading, or we did partner reading, or we had the students read silently. And we actually found that the highest on-task behavior was with closed reading. I read stop and you say the next word. And now, if we look at the research on active participation and what makes a difference, one is holdups. Students write on their slate, and then when all the students have done it, you say, hold it up, and they hold it up and you look at it. So slates are one thing that could be used, but maybe I have numbered items and I say, I'm thinking of the vocabulary term that means this, and think about it, put the number on your table. Now show me. Okay, it's an active neighborhood. So now we're going to hear dogs too. Yes. And they could, you could make written responses, which I'm going to have you do and put it in your chat box. That's our main communication for these 2 days. So I'll be expecting to see you put all of your answers in, all 88 of you. That would be great. And at the end, you're going to say, well, these were my best practices, my takeaways that I intend to do. You'll be putting that in your chat box so the people could see what you plan to do, but also so that I could see what was most useful. So why did I spend time on this? Because even though we are remote, I know that your learning will be highest if I ask you to participate. And we know that right up there with explicit instruction being a high leverage practice for general ed and special ed, right, embedded in that is opportunities to respond. As the instruction gets more explicit and the opportunities to respond goes up, so doth students' learning. All right, well, if you have questions, that's how we're going to use the chat box in addition to you responding. Put a question in there. Occasionally I'll stop and say, Michelle, do we have any questions that we need to talk about before we go forward? All right, thank you very much with active participation. Now, you might have noticed I kind of got into exploring a little bit of South Dakota. So I'm always interested in what's the bird, what is the flower, what is the animal, and yours are so South Dakota. Look at the, and I have never had a chance to South Dakota to fourfold one. And that times we just need that we need, but maybe have a clear signal for the students to say it together. And I hope to expand, particularly tomorrow, when I discuss the areas that are most often referred to intervention or to special ed, challenges with reading and writing, that you will have new tools that you could use in your classes. And my hope is that you will definitely pluck something out to apply in your own classes. So what are our goals for today? And read the first one with me. List the critical elements of explicit instruction. So we're going to look at 13 elements of explicit instruction. And at the end, you're going to have a 2-minute, basically a retrieval of the information called retrieval practice, where you're going to list the 13 elements. So we'll check that out at the end. And that you would, as we go through these elements, say, that's one I do very, very, very well. When I do, but I could be more consistent. Oh, that one, I better add that to my repertoire. It would make a difference for the students that I am blessed to teach. And we're particularly looking at this and reading it with me. Be aware of the importance of how high leverage practices are implemented. Equity is in the how. So you might say, okay, for example, yes, I have students say answers together. Ooh, but I don't use a signal for them to say it together. So I have a lot of kids who just blurt out. And then the stronger students are more likely to blurt, and the other kids just mimic them. So it's a lack of equity. And so in the how we do things comes about the equity of inclusion of everyone. So those are what our learning intentions are for today. So someone asked me recently, what is an analogy to what we are to be doing as teachers? Well, and I said, here's a good analogy, that you're outside a grocery store and you're ready to step in it. And you know exactly why you're there. You are there at the grocery store to get groceries. And the groceries are going to be displayed so you can find them. And there's going to be people that could support you if you couldn't find it. And you are finding what is absolutely essential to your essence, and that is good food. And a school and classrooms are very much the same thing. That when you open the door of a school or classroom and walk through it, the expectation, the reason that you are there, the purpose of you being in that situation is to learn reading skills and writing skills and social skills, to learn information in science and social studies. It is learning. But so often what I see happening is we are forgetting what our goal is what I am doing, bringing out more learning. Am I optimizing that learning? And so we're going to keep our total eye for these 2 mornings on the outcome we desire. Learning and more 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 learning. Not the activities that we're doing, but the learning that they produce. That is where we have to be razor focused to make a difference. And why are we doing these sessions? Well, we're doing them because what we do as teachers directly relates to the learning that students receive. How we deliver a curriculum material increases the probability of learning. And so it is that relationship that we're looking at. What are the teaching behaviors that relate to learning and more learning and more learning and more learning and more learning? Okay, I had a lot of fun doing my PowerPoints. And we're going to see this throughout. So people often ask me, well, how can we make a difference for all of our students? And when I look at the research on this, over time, over the last 50 years, what has made the most difference is, first, if the school district, if the school, if the principal at that school and the teachers at that school and the interventionists and the paraeducators have a relentless focus on learning, a relentless focus on learning. And if they have a relentless focus on teaching and the relationship of teaching to learning. that this is constantly what we go back to. Is learning occurring on critical content? Is learning occurring on critical content? And then, in addition to that, a relentless focus on how we do everything. Maybe we use partners in our classroom. How do we do it to optimize that? Maybe we utilize choral reading. How do we optimize that? And so it is in the how, once again, that brings about that equity. So we are going to be talking about teaching and learning, teaching and learning, teaching and learning, teaching and learning. And everything we're going to cover are high leverage practices, ones that have a long history of making a difference, ones that have solid research to say they make a difference. It's sort of like if you went to your physician and said, this is your ailment, and this is what I prescribe. You would want a high level leverage medication. You'd want a high leverage procedures that you're going to do so that there would be a chance that you would have optimum health. And we want optimum learning, which is definitely also related to health. So we're going to look at high leverage practices. How we do it makes a difference, and it is in that difference, in the details, that we have equality in our classrooms. Well, again, because of my experience last year with South Dakota educators, I knew that your education and your knowledge of critical high leverage practices was extraordinarily high. So we are going to focus on not what are those practices, we'll review that, but how to polish them into a highest level. Polish, polish, polish. And, you know, after 55 years of teaching, I am still polishing my practice. So it is all about how we do what is essential. So with that, there are some guiding principles that when the pandemic came about, and you were one of the first groups I talked to in 2021, I sat down, what do I want to really remember from research, particularly cognitive science, that would make a difference in all my trainings. So we're going to go back to those guiding principles. I know we have some people who were not with us in the past, but one is good instruction is good instruction. To me, this is so critical. We have general ed teachers, we have interventionists, we have special ed teachers. The high leverage practices in general ed are the high level practices in special ed are the high leverage practices in intervention. And this is really important because I've had sometimes like a principal say, well, I really can't coach and go into a special ed class because I'm not in special ed. And I say, okay, tell me what are the good elements in a general ed class? Well, they have a clear objective, they directly teach the information, they have clarity, they have many opportunities to respond. And I say, aha, those are the same things you're going to look for when we go into a special ed classroom because they make a difference. Good instruction is good instruction. And then we had the periods of times where we had to go virtual and people would say, well, I can't teach in virtual remote lessons because I'm not trained to do that. And I'd say, well, what did you do? And I'll never forget having a math teacher at the very beginning of students having to be at home and be remote say to me, I just can't do this. And I said, well, if they were in your classroom, what would you do? She said, well, I'd greet them at the door. And when they came in, we would do review of what we had learned in the past that was necessary for today's lesson. I said, good, do that. And then I would do demonstration of our new skill. I said, good, do that. Then I would have guided practice with what we had done. I said, good, do that. Then I'd check their understanding before I gave them anything to do independently. I said, good, do that. And throughout all of that, I'd have many opportunities to respond. I said, great, do that. Because good instruction is good instruction. So that was a teacher from Michigan. And so then we worked on how you would do that. And our students did very well with remote instruction because good instruction is good instruction. So because I was in Portland during the pandemic, normally I would spend all of my time on the road with very little time in Portland, but now I got to meet and greet my own community. And so I read a lot of cognitive science, and I came away with this. Remember this: what they think about is what they learn. What they think about is what they learn. And so if you were thinking about what dogs I have in the neighborhood, you were less likely to be processing what I was saying because I sort of took your attention away from what we were doing. What you're thinking about is what they learn. So one of the things that I did that was pretty interesting during the 2.5 years up to now in the pandemic is I did worked with many school districts on how to give feedback to their teachers, and I trained them remotely. And we would watch videos. And so I actually watched more than 250 lessons during the pandemic from special ed and general ed, from kindergarten through high school. It was a total delight. But one of the things I started doing when I reviewed a video was stopping it and asking myself, at this moment, what would the students be thinking about? Would they be thinking about what the teacher has established as the goal of the lesson? Would they be thinking about the content? Or would they be thinking about something that was irrelevant to the learning? A digression. And so I found that very fascinating to do, and I recommend it for you. Video lessons, watch them, stop and say, what are my students thinking about? And see if you have kept them thinking about what they needed to learn. If I'm not thinking about it, I won't be learning it. And remember this. And this emerged as importance because I had so many people saying to me, you know, our children certainly aren't, they just aren't motivated. They just are not motivated, as if motivation was a quality that was universal, that you were motivated about everything. That is not the research on motivation. Motivation seems to grow out of success and seeing that it was of value. And so we as teachers have to teach in such a way that the students are going to experience success and see through our own teaching and our own emphasis that it is of value. Then I want to give it effort. Then I want to try harder. I want to put more energy into it. So a very good equation here. If you think someone is not motivated, then say to yourself, this child has not experienced success in this area. I need to teach in such a fashion that they're going to have success, see the value in what we're doing from my own energy that I express this, so that they're more motivated. So those are the three big ideas. Good instruction is good instruction. What they think about is what they learn. Success plus value equals motivation. Say those three to yourself, put up 3 fingers, touch your fingers and say them. teacher talk. What I'm doing with you is what I would do in your classroom. And that is having the students, we just gave them information, we rehearsed the information, and now I'm going to use retrieval practice where they have to think about it. But I'm often doing this, I'm saying, put 3 fingers up, touch the fingers as you're doing it to make it more overt, to increase the probability that's what they're doing. And if I was like a 5th grade teacher, I might say, ones, turn and tell your partner as you touch your fingers. Twos, add to it if they've forgotten any part. So I'm going to often do that. Stop and have you retell it. And then, of course, we would couple that with feedback so that you could be reminded of it. Because my intention is not coverage. My intention is learning and reinforcing what you already know. All right. Well, I would like you to read this to yourself and begin. Okay, thank you very much. And so this was from a book called Explicit and Direct Instruction that came out in 2019. And it is a very good paragraph that is going to remind us of some of the biggest ideas as we relook at explicit instruction. That one, chunking content into small components. So breaking down the critical content into obtainable pieces. And for those of you who teach students with learning disabilities, you might even have to break them down into smaller components so that they could have mastery of each. And then guiding their initial attempts. So we're going to do demonstration of the information, and then we are going to guide them step by step through it with a gradual release of responsibility. So they're going to have to do more and more and more until they could do it independently. And summarized that gradual release of responsibility from I do it, the teacher demonstrates it, we do it together, and then you do it. This is actually terms that I coined in 1974. I was writing an article on instruction, on demonstration, guided practice, checking for understanding, the kind of wording that Madeline Hunter, the premier educator at that time, utilized. Demonstration, guided practice, checking for understanding. And I thought we need some terms that are memorable. I do it, we do it, you do it. So we're going to see that as I demonstrate lessons for you. And so here's a question, because I knew that we were going to have and are blessed to have not just special educators, but general educators with us. And one of the questions I'm often asked is, well, when should explicit instruction be used? Versus models that would be on a continuum from very explicit instruction to total discovery, where the students would have information that they were to discover on their own. When should explicit instruction be used versus different discovery methods? Well, research speaks to this directly. It appears that it is based on the amount of background knowledge that you have. That if the students have little or no background knowledge, they really profit from very explicit instruction. Now we have kindergarten teachers and they enter your room and they don't know letter sound associations. And so you teach it. You don't hope that they will discover it. No, it's too critical to leave up to discovery. You teach it. But maybe you're a 7th grade teacher and you're teaching writing, and the students need to write a solid topic sentence to go with their paragraph. They've obviously not discovered it. And by looking at their paragraphs in 7th grade, and you say to yourself, they need to be explicitly taught this skill. If we have little or no background knowledge, we really, really profit from very explicit instruction. And that means that when the students are novices, not experts, that they really benefit from explicit instruction. So when the pandemic came upon us and I was at home, I decided to take up cello again. And I am a definite novice in cello. And I said to myself, I am not an expert. I need a teacher who's an expert, but I need someone who would demonstrate, who would play with me, guided practice, who would listen to me and give feedback, that I needed very explicit instruction. And another one is basically when content is totally new. So I taught a lesson remotely as a demonstration on teaching algebra remotely, and the content was new to the students. And so they profited from very explicit instruction. Discovery often has challenges in that you could discover it or not. And if it's important, I want them to know it. So I'm going to teach it explicitly. But also, I could come up with misunderstandings. And I want to teach it so explicitly that that's not going to be present. So when I have little or no background knowledge, when I am a novice, not an expert, when something is new content, I profit from explicit instruction. And we have good evidence that if we have students that have had difficulty obtaining information in the past, that they profit most from being in situations with very explicit instruction. So if you look at that, what you realize is, well, for the roles that you're in, 4th grade teacher, 7th grade language arts teacher, high school algebra teacher, special ed teacher in a self-contained setting, special ed teacher and resource, interventionist, almost all of what you teach would follow these criteria. Well, we are going
Anita,
to, yes.
I believe what you were just covering answers this question, but just to reinforce it, there was a question posed, which is this approach, explicit instruction, appropriate or suggested for all age levels, or is it more for elementary age? Mainly referring to I do, we do, you do. Is it appropriate for middle school students?
Absolutely. It's appropriate for, if you are going to my university where I taught 3 universities, and you were learning how to be a teacher, I would say to myself, you need an excellent model. You need to watch good teaching so that, and you need explicit instruction in every aspect of it, so that your performance will be at the highest level to make a difference with children. And you are adults, but you needed very explicit instruction. And so if I am teaching middle school math, middle school language arts, middle school concepts in social studies, middle school science concepts, I am going to teach it explicitly. It is more effective and it's more efficient. So that, and I'm going to have the students have an opportunity to apply those strategies, that knowledge, and those skills. It's simply more Explicit instruction is effective and efficient. That's the title of our book. Okay, thank you very much. And Michelle, I'll stop occasionally and say, Michelle, do you have any questions? Because that's very useful to everybody. All right, we're going to watch a video. This is a video that I did in Wichita, Kansas. And we're going to post the whole video for you. It's 38 minutes long, but we're just going to watch the first 11 minutes. And here is your job. You're going to record any high leverage practices that you observed. So you need note-taking paper. And when we're all done, I'm going to give you a moment to pick out your 2 best practices that you noticed, and then they're going to go put that in the chat box. So we're looking for high leverage practices that would make a difference. And it could be opportunities to respond. It could be the pace of the lesson. It could be the use of a routine. Those are examples of high leverage practices, and be certain that you've taken notes, because everybody's going to put their best practices in the chat box when we're stopped. All right, so let me stop this share and pull up the video. So Michelle, do you see that on your screen?
I see the control bar for your video.
That's what we needed. Thank you very much. Okay, are you ready to take notes, everyone? And I'm actually going to take notes on opportunities to respond. And so every time the teacher requests from students that they say something, or they write something, or they do something, I'm going to tally it, because later we'll be looking at the research on opportunities to respond as a wonderful way to gauge the quality of instruction. But you're writing down best practices. 5th graders, I'm doing a demonstration in vocabulary. And I chose this because vocabulary is something that we can teach in general ed, special ed, intervention, across classes.
So we're going to learn the words for the next story. And when I looked at the words fell into categories. And if words are in the same category, it makes them easier to learn. So this is a story about what, everyone? Wild horses. So there was a number of horse words in the story. So here are the horse words, and Echo read the words. Mustangs, herd, stallion, mare. Now, some of you have a lot of horse experience. Raise your hand if you've ridden a horse. Okay. Raise your hand if you've not yet had that experience in life, but someday you might. Okay, so we're going to look very briefly at the meanings. And the first word is what, everyone? Mustangs. And of course, it is a noun. And read the first sentence. Mustangs are wild horses that live on the plains. Okay, now, the land form that is most prevalent, the major land form of Kansas is what, everyone? A plain. A large, vast, flat land. Get your hands out in front of you, but don't hit anyone. So it's a vast, flat land. So the Mustangs, the wild Mustangs, even today, live on the, what, everyone? The plains. Now let's learn something about these Mustangs. And wait, go. The ancestors of Mustangs were horses brought here from Spain. So it came a long time ago. Did they come by ship or airplane? Which one? Ship. Okay. And so people who were coming here to explore said, we better take our own horses. And they brought their horses, which were Mustangs. So the next word is what, everyone? Herd. And everyone? A herd is a group of animals of a single kind. So all of these animals are, okay, listen, I'm sorry. All of these animals are what, everyone? Horses. All of these animals are horses, and they live and travel together. Thus, they form a herd. So in a herd, would we likely find a goat? Yes or no? Because they're animals of a single kind. There might be a herd of goats, but they will not be mixing with the horses. Now, this word is stallion. What word? Stallion. Read it. A stallion is an adult male horse. And that's important to this story because really the main character is a Black man who was a cowboy, but also was his interaction with a, what, everyone? A stallion. And so we had to know that that would be an adult male horse. And the word is mare. And it's what part of speech? And go. A mare is an adult female horse. Okay, and so we don't know the gender of the colt, but we do know as the mother that this horse is what, everyone? A female. Right, a female horse called a mare. So in the story, they talk about the Mustangs, the herd, and the stallion, and also a group of mares. Well, let's just firm that up, particularly for the people who've not ridden horses in the past. So here we have the words, and I'm going to tell you about one of the words. You're going to think, which is it? Is it what, everyone? Mustangs or herd or stallion or mare? And you're going to form the number on your table until I say show me, and then you're going to put it in the air. I am looking at these words and I'm thinking of the label for a male horse. Form it on your table. And high in the air, show me. And it is what word, everyone? Stallion. So a male horse, you're one of the people who has not had that experience yet. So that word is what, everyone? Stallion. Okay, I am thinking of, excuse me, dear, I'm thinking of a group of horses that travel and live together. Form the number on your table. High in the air. And it is what, everyone? A herd. I am thinking of horses that their origin, where they came from, was Spain. High in the air. And it is what? Mustangs. Okay, and so a female horse, form the last one. High in the air. And it is a mare. So tell me, female or male? Stallion. Male. Mare. Female. Stallion. Male. Mare. Female. Stallion. Mare. Female. Okay. So that's important for this story. Now, they also have words related to the, what, everyone? The land. And Echo, read the words. Plain, bluff, ravine, horizon. Hey, so words that we need to know, and anybody in Kansas should know this one. The word is what, everyone? Plain. That's an interesting word, though, because in one way, it is a landform. And read the sentence. A plain is a large area of land with few trees. So one of the meanings of it as a, what, everyone, a noun is, get your hands out there. It is a vast area of land. It is a, what, everyone, a plain. But we also use it another way. And that is when something's fairly simple, it is very, what, everyone? Plain. So for example, your top has only one color in it. It's very nice. And so it is what, everyone? Plain. However, that t-shirt definitely is not plain. So two totally different meanings, but in this story, it is talking about the landform, everyone, the landform. Now, next word is what, everyone? Bluff. Okay, and read it. A bluff is a high cliff or a bay. So is this the bluff?
No.
Hey, is this the bluff?
No.
Could this be the bluff?
Yes.
Yes. Wow, a very high cliff. Now that's actually very important to this story, because if I wanted to see what people were doing out in the plain, I might want to find a bluff. So if I stood up here, as you can see, you could almost take your horse up there, and would I be able to look out over the plain? Yes or no?
Yes.
And so you see how significant that is to the story, the actual landforms. Well, the next word is what, everyone? Ravine. And read it. A ravine is a narrow, deep valley, usually worn away by water. So here we have all of this rock worn away, and you can see that there is water at the base of it, at the bottom of it. This is definitely a what, everyone? A ravine. So oftentimes they are very narrow and very deep with water at the bottom. Everybody? So very deep and narrow, and at the bottom there might be some water, a river or a stream, and that might be a what, everyone? A ravine. And let's say you're riding your horse, boom, 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 boom. Maybe a stallion, maybe a mare, maybe a Mustang, but no herd. And you come, up here's a bluff, and you have this space between the rocks. What are you going to do? So could this be a barrier, interrupt the movement of a herd or the movement of a horse? Yes or no? I think so, because my horse is not going to be able to leap over this. And if we step in it, so they were very dangerous. Even today, if you go to the Grand Canyon, they will inform you, tell you that you better watch out for a ravine. Because if you're walking along, you don't see it. And so you must watch out for a ravine. Okay, and so now I'm going to point to something, and you're going to decide if it is a plain, a bluff, or ravine. Okay, and don't say it, whisper to your partner what it is. Okay, you got the right answer. We'll work on whisper later. And what is it, everybody? It is a bluff. Now, look down here. And I want you to think, is this a ravine? Yes or no? Look at it. Is this a ravine? No. The reason it's not a ravine is that a ravine was very, very deep. And this is simply a river. Yes, it has water, but it is not a, what, everyone? A ravine. Okay? Well, here is another term that has to do with the land. And I want you to put your eyes right here. Right there. That line, and read it with me. The horizon is the line where the sky and the ground seem to meet. So is this the horizon? Yes or no?
No.
Is this the horizon?
Yes.
Yes, it is right where the sky appears to meet the land. So if you're looking out at a distance, you might be able to see the, what, everyone? The horizon. And so in the story, someone comes toward him, and it looks like he's coming right from the, what, everyone? Horizon. Well, now, the definition said it's where the sky meets the, what, everyone? The ground. But this is a, what, everyone? A horizon. In this case, the sky is meeting the ocean. And so in sailing, they use this line to get an idea of distance. So the horizon is important whether I'm on land or on sea. Horizon. Okay, get ready. And so is this a horizon? Yes or no? Okay, and is this a horizon? Is this a horizon?
Yes.
And ones, tell your partner, or excuse me, A's, tell your partner how you knew it was a horizon. A's, tell your partner how you knew it was a horizon. Well, and so the land meets the, yeah, okay, right. So you said it was a horizon, and it's considered a horizon because, right, so the sky meets the land or the ground, and so that is a horizon. Okay, you're gonna be thinking here, we're gonna ask ourselves, is it a what, everyone, a plain, a bluff, a ravine, or a horizon? Okay, and so think about it. B's, tell your partner what you know it is and tell them why you know it. Right, and you know, you did very thoughtful thing, you acted it out, that'll help you remember it. So did you think it was a, which one? Plain bluff, ravine, or horizon? A ravine, yes, ravine. See, this group over here is saying, well, it's like a ravine, it's definitely not a plain, and it is not a high bluff, and it is not where the land meets the sky, the horizon. It is a ravine. Wow, that is a dangerous ravine if I was wrong, riding along that. Whoa. Well, last one. This one, anyone in Kansas should get right, okay? Is it a, what, everyone, a plain, bluff, ravine, or horizon? Now, I'm talking about this right down here. Okay, so you've got to get the right answer based on which part of this area I'm talking about. And A's, tell your partner what you think it is and why you think it is that, and go. What do you think?
I think it's plain because there's nothing on the grass and there's no trees.
Yes. Yay! Everybody, it's a plain. Tell us why.
Because it's just grass and there's nothing on it.
So, and continue, you had rest of that answer right. So it is a flat land, it has grass on it, and no trees. So does Kansas have a little bit of a plain? Yes, okay. Well, this word is what?
Okay, we are going to stop there. Later, if you want to, you can listen to rest of it. I'm going to give you a moment to look over your notes and identify 1, 2, or 3 things that you thought were high leverage practices used in this lesson. All right, so think about it. And in a moment, I'll say, put it in the chat. Okay, I wrote down my 3 big high leverage practices. And so if you would now put them in the chat and we'll read some of those. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you some, and I'll be reading all of these later. And they're coming in as fast as they can. Great. So go back up here to the, so echo reading. So we read things in a number of ways. We did echo reading as well as choral reading. And many of you said one of the best practices was opportunities to respond. They said things, they didn't write, but they also did things such as acting things out. And Kliko, you said that there was many kinesthetic responses, choral reading and choral close and choral responses, echo reading, giving the students visuals to attend to, and having actions embedded in the lessons, having private responses before public responses, excellent. They said something to their partner before I called on them. Kristen, pace of the lesson, that was one of the things I wrote down. It was a perky pace that moved along. We only watched 15 minutes of this, but there was a high number of responses that were requested. And let's see, whole class answering. You're going to see that one of my mottos for opportunities to respond is everybody does everything. Everybody read it together. Everybody said it together. Everybody said it to their partner. Yes, I called on individuals, but I did it after they had prepared the answer by saying it to themselves, by saying it to their partner, and then called on them. And explicit teaching of vocabulary. Cheryl, I agree, is that we learn vocabulary in many sources, but the majority of vocabulary we learn before we go into middle school is because someone taught it to us. So we had echo reading, talking with a partner, terrific. All right, well, I have your feedback for me to examine, but let's look at the feedback that I wrote in terms of this lesson. And so let's pull our PowerPoint back up. And so here were some things that I wrote down. I often look for not the P's and Q's of teaching, but the P's and C's. And in terms of the P's, the teacher was prepared, knew exactly what was expected of the students, what the teacher wanted the students to learn, and kept the students focused on those critical elements. There was a positive environment. The teacher was very present in teaching, not answering the phone, not checking her iWatch that she did have on that day, but was very present, passionate in terms of the content that was taught, passionate in terms of student learning. And the pace, as many of you identified, was perky. It moved along. We're going to learn that clarity is critical. In fact, when you look at the research by John Hattie and look at effect sizes of teaching behaviors that make a difference, one of the very highest ones is clarity, clarity, clarity. Clarity of the objective, clarity of the demonstrations, clarity of the vocabulary instruction, clarity, clarity, clarity. And I wrote down just 3 times that I noticed clarity. That the purpose, to learn words that are necessary for the passage we're reading, it was a clear purpose. The definitions were clear. The explanations were clear. And one of the things that I did in this case was group cognitively the information into schema. These are words about horses. These are words about landforms. But if I was to come and visit your classes, one thing I would look for is routines. Because where the teacher, yes, has behavioral routines, but also has academic routines. So there was an academic routine for vocabulary embedded for teaching each of these words. Just to remind you what that might look like. So the teacher introduced the word's pronunciation. The teacher then introduced the meaning of the word, then provided examples, in some cases just opposed it to non-examples, and then asked questions to check their understanding. So it is helpful to have routines. Pronunciation of the word, the meaning of the word, illustrated with examples, and check their understanding. Take a moment and say that routine to yourself. Okay, 4 fingers up, saying it to yourself. So pronunciation, meaning, illustrate with examples and non-examples, check their understanding. Again, we're going to do this throughout because of the research on cognitive science that shows that rehearsal, so we gave you a chance to rehearse the information, coupled with retrieval practice, where you retrieve it without a prompt, and you have to struggle to bring that forth, makes more difference than we just going over it one more time. And then feedback makes a difference. So one day I just did something similar, and a person said, "How did you do that?" Well, if you have PowerPoints and you touch W, it whites it out and then brings it back. Or if you have a PowerPoint up and you touch black it out and then have it come back up. Cool to know, but a good way to allow for, after rehearsal, retrieval practice. Well, what else did I notice? That it was vocabulary instruction, and you look at the research on vocabulary, the students need many exposure to the word, where they say it, they read it, they tell their partner about it, many exposures for it to become a part of their own knowledge. So we have many exposures. Telling the kids the part of speech has proven to be effective in the studies with 4th graders and above. And I introduced a multiple meaning, introduced first the meaning as it was used in the story, and then I introduced another meaning. Of course, these two are very related because a plane is called a plane because it's plain, there's no trees. And if we look at the research on comprehension, we know a great deal about comprehension in reading, and we're preparing the kids for this. That, one, I have to be able to read the words accurately, and thus I have to have decoding skills. I have to understand the vocabulary that's embedded in the passage, and I have to have the necessary background knowledge in order for me to put it together for comprehension. So comprehension is very related to, I can read the words, I know the meaning of the words, and I have the background knowledge. So that was embedded here and infused in this lesson. And opportunities to respond. Remember the 2 big high leverage practices from the CEC's review of research of their high level practices was explicit instruction and opportunities to respond. So there were unison responses where short answers they said together. There was choral reading, let's read the definition together. There were partner responses with assigned partners where they told partners answers as well as explained them. that I called on individuals, but I had no volunteers. In fact, at your school, if you were looking at equity, the first thing you'd want to do is reduce students raising their hands. Why? Well, who's going to raise their hands? High-performing students, most assertive students, most proficient in English, a practice that I call teaching the best and leaving the rest. So I call on individuals after we said an answer together. After they said an answer to their partner, then I randomly called on students. And we used holdups. Remember I told you holdups were good because everybody responds and I can monitor everybody in the class. So they had to match the definition to the concept we've learned and had to show the answer. So I asked a question, they determined the answer, and then I said, show me, they held it up, and I gave them feedback. And I monitored when they were saying answers to their partners. I listened carefully, I looked carefully, and I circulated and monitored. And the strategy that I always teach is when your kids are writing something down or they're sharing with a partner, we circulate and monitor. I walk around, I look around, I talk around. From Stan Payne's research, walk around, look around, talk around. Everybody, walk around, look around, talk around. The benefits are enormous for using that strategy. And I gave them feedback, affirmative feedback, where I praised them, and I gave them corrective feedback. And when one student made an error, I told them the answer, and then I had the whole class repeat it. We're going to learn about some of the newest research on corrections, which I think will be helpful for general ed, special ed interventionists. Now, gross. I was a guest to this classroom, and one of the challenges was the room arrangement, because the students were pushed up against the front wall. There wasn't a space, very useful space in the front. I would have actually had, and so I kept going to the back of the room or the side of the room. What we know is that if I'm teaching a large group of students, I need a teaching arena in the front of the room. And every time I give an explanation or a demonstration or a direction, I would be in that teaching arena so that the students knew that if I was there, they needed to be looking at me. They need to be attending to the information. It was critical. The end result here is because I couldn't do that, that I gave them specific information from the side of the room and the back of the room, but that is not optimum practice. The only time I should be moving around the classroom is if I am monitoring their responses. And I will tell you, I now see this. I was forced in this one because of the room arrangement, but I see student teachers constantly moving all around the room, and the students don't know what to attend to because a teacher never stops in the teaching arena so that they know to look there and attend. So they're getting their 10,000 steps in, but it is reducing the attention of the students. So just remember, if you're teaching it, be in a singular spot. I've had some teachers that we've even had to buy a red rug, a little circle in the front of the room to remind them, be in your circle for critical information. Then move out only if you are looking at their work or listening to them and monitoring. So there was a definite improvement for Archer. She always needs to get better. All right. Well, here's what we're going to do. we're going to have little 5-minute breaks. I'm going to set my timer right now so you can stretch your body. 5 minutes only, so don't get lost. I will see you in 5 minutes. And enjoy your break. Put questions in because we'll have questions with Michelle right when we come back.
Anita, are you seeing that question?
I am. Is that the
Good.
only question we had?
There is one in the chat also, asking about what are your thoughts on student arrangement and seating in regards to the teaching arena? Traditional rows, pods, tables, have their choice.
All right.
Anita, at the very end of the day, I will like to do a drawing again for all of our attendees for next year's Institute, if that's all right.
Absolutely. You remind me.
I will.
All right. So welcome back. I'm going to give you a second to get back to your seats. Excellent. So Michelle, there was just one big question there. It was about room arrangement. And the question was, would you recommend rows or pods or tables, choice or not? Well, let's start with a research validated question there. So there were a number of studies that asked this question. Would the room arrangement make a difference in terms of the on-task behavior of students during instruction and during independent work? And what the studies did was compared two methods of organizing a classroom. And one would be to have rows, and you might have the rows also with two desks together so that there's partners. And so 1 row, 2, 3, 4 with partners. And another would be to put them in pods, often of 4. So you'd have 4 desks that were facing each other. So get that in your mind as 2 different relationships. So then they very systematically looked at this in terms of on-task behavior. Because if I'm going to be learning in a class, I have to be attending to the critical information. If I'm going to do well on independent work, I have to be attending to that independent work. So attention is prominent in all learning situations. And here is what they found, and it won't shock you, that there was significantly higher on-task behavior in rows versus in pods. Now, and that was both during instruction and independent work. But we're humans. Think about this. If we had a group of people sitting around, our friends, sitting around facing each other, and I'm looking at you and you're looking at me, we're going to talk. We're going to communicate. We're not attending to the teacher. We're attending to our peers. And you say, but what about cooperative learning? Well, there's no reason that we can't cooperate if we're in paired rows. I can say, 1's tell your partner, 2's tell your partner, and they can do that with ease. And I could even, if we had desks that were not attached, we could even have rows, and then I could have a routine, as I will often do in classes, where I've taught one, let's say the person that's in the front, the 2 pairs, I'll say, everyone go to your group, and they'll, first row will turn their chairs around and talk to the kids behind them. So we can easily get into cooperative groups, but we don't have to be there except when it is directly related to what I would like them to do. So we've got to, just because something's in style, like we should have everybody in pods so they could talk cooperatively, well, we better ask ourselves the question, is that interfering or is it facilitating more learning? And if we want to teach cooperative behaviors, could we do it in a way that has an optimal amount of learning that's occurring? All right. And should the students have total choice? Choice is not terribly effective or efficient. It's definitely not efficient, like come and sit wherever you want. Well, that's more choice than you need, because you are grouping students with partners and you're going to be thoughtful about the partners. There's some children who shouldn't be in the same school, much less the same room. You don't want them as partners. So you're going to assign the partners and you're going to change them so that after 2 to 6 weeks, you'll change them so you can make those kind of decisions. we're setting up this environment optimally. It's like when I go to the opera, I have assigned seats at the opera and it's facing the opera so that I can have my total attention on that. I don't come in and sit on the floor or sit on a bench. I have my seat and it optimizes the situation. So, okay, so keep those questions rolling in. Now there was another question I noticed, and that was, so you said you were going to take data on opportunities to respond. Well, I did. I tallied the first 10 minutes. And there were in 10 minutes, 75 opportunities to respond. And that opportunity to respond is anytime the teacher says, read this with me, boom, and show me with your fingers, boom, say an answer to your partner, boom. So those are what I tallied. And there were 75 of those. So there was about 7.5 opportunities to respond per minute. Now the research that has been done on this, you're going to see in a minute, or maybe a few more minutes, showed that teachers who did expert teaching had at least 3 to 5, when the responses were fairly short, not complex, 3 to 5 responses per minute. So this is above that, pretty perky pace, but it also, I've taught so much that for me, the responses are fairly automatic. So I'm able to have high opportunities to respond. And I use a variety of responses, from choral responses to partner responses to hand signals to actions. But if I was trying to work on improving practice, I might just gradually add them to my repertoire. So Michelle, did you see any other questions or should we move on?
But we do have one other question
Yes.
in the Q&A.
Yes.
It's asking about, I'll just read it. When students have dividers up for a test, can the teacher leave the teaching arena to ensure the students are all keeping pace with her? Should the teacher return to the teaching arena to read the next word or question aloud?
So a very specific situation, they have barriers up for taking a test. And so where should the teacher be? Well, I would presume at the beginning when the teacher is giving directions that the teacher's in the front of the room so that students could focus on them. And then as they were working independently on the test, the teacher would monitor, but they would have to be extraordinarily quiet and giving no feedback to any of the students. They're just increasing the probability of on-task behavior. So they have to be very careful not to draw the students' attention away. So that teacher knew what to do by looking at what the effect of their behavior on students' performance. All right, Michelle, thank you very much. And you keep an eye on that chat box. You have questions, you put them in there. We want to answer your questions. And because a middle school teacher said, would this apply to middle school? We'll be certain I'll add tomorrow a video in middle school. All right. We are going to look at those 13 elements. And I'm going to recommend that you might even want to keep a list where you just wrote down an idea so that you'd have a list of 13 of them. So I'm going to actually write on my paper a list of 13. And so do the same so that you could have a little summary of them, so you could take notes on each of them as we go. And you're going to get the handout, so you'll have that too. So when we looked at explicit instruction, we divided it up into these areas that we're going to look at. What does explicit instruction say about content? What does explicit instruction say about the design of the lesson? the delivery of the lesson, and practice. So we're going to look at those 13 elements are spread across content, design, delivery, and practice. So what does it say about content? And reading it with me and go. Focus on critical content. And it is important that we hone in on what's going to make the most difference. That we look at teaching what would be useful in the moment, but also something that would be useful in the future. This kind of goes with one of my mottos, often called Archerisms. Teach the stuff and cut the fluff, everybody. Teach the stuff and cut the fluff. Now, if I am an interventionist and we want the student's performance here and they're here, one of the ways that we accelerate their growth is getting rid of anything that is not essential, so that we can teach what is absolutely necessary that will make a difference. So let's just look at some examples. Many of you teach reading, and you're very aware of what research has told us that makes a difference in terms of reading. That we would teach students decoding. In fact, about 80% of the students that are referred to intervention or special ed for the area of reading, their major challenge is they can't read the words, and so that they need to be taught decoding. And that involves teaching them phonemic awareness, where they are taught how to listen to and recognize the sounds within words. We teach decoding of words by looking at the letters and saying the sounds, not looking at the pictures and guessing, no. Not guessing by the content that is present, no. Look at the letters, say the sounds for the letters, and blend it together. And then we add morphology, looking at the prefixes, looking at the suffixes in order to figure out the pronunciation of the word. And we know that we should have embedded within our decoding lessons encoding or spelling. So decoding goes the print to the speech. Spelling goes from the speech to the print. And these are reciprocal abilities, and the students need experience with both to make optimum gains in terms of word reading. And we know that they need many exposures to words to become sight vocabulary. Now, we've messed up that term. We've often had sight word lists that really were high frequency words that we want kids to recognize instantly. But basically, any word they've had more than one exposure to, we want them to have a memory of that. And thus it is instant recognition, a sight word. And then we want them to read fluently. And you know, and we're going to emphasize this again tomorrow, fluency includes you read accurately at the rate of speech, appropriate rate, and you read with expression or prosody. And so we want it to become automatic, which is basically related to the number of words that are in your sight vocabulary. This is critical content. This is critical content in general ed. This is critical content in intervention. This is critical content if your IEP is in reading. And we also want them to have language comprehension because remember, comprehension requires I can read the words, I know the meaning of the words, and I have background knowledge. So critical content is teaching them vocabulary, as I did for that lesson, embedded with background knowledge. Critical content. Teach the stuff and cut the fluff. Looking at the pictures, fluff? No. Look at the word. That's the stuff. And we would look at teaching them strategies that get them to attend that critical content. For example, this is a strategy that has research validity with both special ed and general ed students, called Getting the Gist. And probably for particularly our special ed people, the name Sharon Vaughn at University of Texas, Austin, is familiar with you as one of the major researchers in special ed. You read a paragraph, you name the who or what the paragraph is about in a brief phrase. You identify 2 or 3 important details, and then you put those together, the topic and the critical details, and shrink it down to the gist, either by stating it or by writing it. We're going to see that that is one of the strategies recommended to teach students who are struggling older readers. Well, first one, then I'm going to put down critical content to remember that. What else do we know about the content? Well, this one is one of the most significant aspects of critical content curriculum, both in general ed, but particularly in intervention special ed. And that is breaking it down into smaller instructional steps, obtainable chunks, breaking it down. I'm going to add that to my notes. And so some examples. Now, this is not an example, but when I wanted to learn more about your state and I looked up South Dakota state animals, actually, I didn't find any other state, and I'm sure there is one that has their own dinosaur state animal, but you had the coyote. I have coyotes right in my neighborhood in downtown Portland. You have honeybees, and I adore honey. And you had the wallaby. I have fished, not in South Dakota, forgive me, but in North Dakota. And I was raised in the state of Washington, which in our, on the east side of the mountains in Washington, there's plains and pheasants, beautiful birds. So I had to look up, so what is the animal and the bird particularly of South Dakota? So this is to be ignored, though it is broken down into all the animals. But here's how we use this and why. I need to break it down so that I can set you up for learning and success. And remember, success plus value leads to motivation. And this goes directly to cognitive science, that we have limited working memory. Most researchers in cognitive science say that we're not able to process more than 7 things at one time. And in our working memories, where we do all of our thinking, all of our planning, and that when information's coming in and it's going over the capacity of our working memory, then we have what is cognitive overload. And you can actually see cognitive overload when students have to process too much. They might become frustrated, or they might act as if they're bored because there's like too much, particularly frustration. So we're breaking it down so that we don't have cognitive overload. And that means when I teach a strategy that has many steps, I might pull out some steps that I'm going to teach before I teach all of the steps. And I'll show you an example of that in a moment. If I have knowledge I'm teaching you, I teach you a little knowledge, I stop, and we have participation of rehearsal and retrieval. I teach you a little knowledge, we stop, we have rehearsal, and we have retrieval. I'm teaching you vocabulary. So I limit the number I'm teaching you, particularly ones that I'm going to teach in depth. So even that little lesson that we looked at, some of the words I gave light touch to, some of them I gave more attention to. But breaking it down into obtainable pieces and looking at curriculum and saying, does this curriculum break something down for my students? And if not, how can I break it down into obtainable pieces so we don't have cognitive overload, so we have success, so we have motivation that leads to wanting to put energy into something? Breaking it down into obtainable pieces. Examples. So tomorrow when I do writing, I'm going to take many examples from the work of Judith Hochman in a book which I recommend for all of you who are teaching writing, The Writing Revolution. And let's just look at the writing process that she teaches for writing a short summary, okay, a short summary. That you would have a plan and you would outline what you're going to include, that you would create a draft for your short summary, and then you'd go back and revise that draft and making changes in it. And then you would edit the draft, looking at spelling, looking at capitalization, looking at punctuation. Oh, that is way too much to teach. That needs to be broken down. So let's look at how she breaks that down. Now the students, there's Judith Hochman and Writing Revolutions. So the students are learning how to write a summary and they have this frame that they're going to use. Where this is the topic of what we read. Here is a topic sentence I'm going to write out that I'm going to use in my summary. And here are 3 details that I'm going to include in the summary. But we don't teach all of it. First, we read an article and the students are just going to afterwards decide what the topic was and then what were 3 things that were critical that they said about that topic, and they're just going to write down 3 notes on this frame. And they might do that with 1 short article, 2 short articles, 3 short articles, just the topic and the details. And then step 2, now we've done that. Now we're going to read our article and we're going to determine the topic, 3 important details, but we are now going to formulate a topic sentence and put that on our plan. And we're going to do that with 1 short article, 2 short articles, 3 short articles. And they're going to be taught that the topic sentence tells what the main idea is of the summary, and the details are going to support the main idea. Then we are going to write a draft, because now we've learned how to fill in the whole thing, the topic sentence, and the 3 details. So we are going to record the topic sentence in our paragraph and sentences that tell about the 3 details. And we do that 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. And then we add to it, revising it, going back and expanding sentences, which we'll learn tomorrow how we teach that, how to add more who or what or why or how. And then also adding transitions. First, in addition, therefore, those kinds of transitions that could be added. But this is a perfect example of taking something that was complex, plan and outline, and then be able to revise and be able to edit And that's the last thing we're going to add, so the students could have success as they go. All right. Now, I just took some examples that emerged in work that I've done in the last 2 years. So I had a teacher, remember that teacher from Michigan who said, I can't teach remotely? Well, I actually walked her through planning a remote unit that she was going to do online. And the first thing we did is we turned the pages in the math book. We wrote down what were the steps that were introduced and then added missing steps so that we would have a systematic sequence, logical, systematic sequence that we were going to follow. But it could be, we have some teachers who teach all subject areas. And even if we were teaching social studies or science, breaking it down into obtainable pieces makes sense. So for example, this teacher said, we're learning about the federal government. Can we name the 3 branches? Then, do we know the functions of each branch? Then, do we know what are the differences and similarities in those functions of each branch? And then what would be the limitations of each branch? Breaking it down, and I would have to make it even more pieces if I had students that had difficulty obtaining new information. Okay, so now we're going to look, so that is content, and we're going to look at the design. And so if I popped into your classroom, and it could be any subject, it could be any grade level, it could be special ed or general ed, and watched a lesson, what would research would say that would be useful embedded within that lesson? And so first, it appears that the students do best if the lessons are organized and focused. And so I'm going to add to my list number 3, just the words organized and focused. Let's just look at the focus part. I should be able to walk into a lesson and say, this teacher is teaching how to decode words with the letters, the vowel combination of OA. And that is what is being taught here and practiced. Ooh, I walk into a middle school lesson and I say, this teacher is teaching students how to generate excellent topic sentences. Ooh, this teacher is teaching students social skills of appropriate distance when they're talking to someone else. So I should be able to figure out quite easily what the lesson is designed to teach. And not surprising, across general ed and special ed, the teachers who had the most gains in terms of learning had very organized lessons. They were prepared, they knew how they were going to proceed, they had some consistent elements within their lessons. Now, everybody who's watching this has had 2 different experiences in their teaching career. They have had lessons that were very organized and focused, and occasional lessons that weren't as organized and focused. And you knew the difference and saw the difference in terms of student learning. So on one day you had a lesson where you planned it and you taught it, and you introduced the objective, and you reviewed what was necessary from prior learning for it. And you told the students the goal of the lesson, and you proceeded from demonstration to guided practice and checking for understanding. And voila, the students had learning. You just wish your principal had been observing this, or your director of special ed had come in and said, wow. And then every one of us have had a moment in time we were less prepared. and we were not certain about exactly what we were going to learn. And instead of directly teaching it, we kind of fished for it. Like, does anybody know what this means? And the learning was not present. So all of us know the power of organized, focused lessons. Much more likely to lead to learning if it's organized and focused. So we have actually looked at the structure of a lesson, and we learned that we need to teach organized and focused lessons on critical content every day in every class. Every day in every class. The students should have the gift of our optimum teaching. Oh, I'll give you 2 or 3 times a year when it wasn't optimum, just because. But organized, focused lessons on critical content every day in every class. What might that mean? Well, basically, no matter who research you look at, no matter what books on instruction you read, they're going to have lessons that have an opening, a body, and a closing. Now, one of those is the one that is most often deleted. And so, even though I can't see you, we're going to just show how we could change something and use holdups. So I want you to think, do you think it is the opening, the body, or the closing that is most often deleted in lessons? And hold up your fingers no matter where you are, even though I can't see you. It is the closing. See how I took something that I could introduce and made it into retrieval practice simply by numbering these and the students having to show that answer. So yes, it is the closing. And that many of our lessons end up with, wow, put your things away, line up, we're out of here. And that is not a closing. Even if I'm teaching maybe a half-hour special ed lesson, I need a closing of a few minutes so we can have dignity at the end, not storm the door. So what might we want in the opening, in the body, in the closing? So in the opening, you might go for this routine that I'm going to get your attention, which I'm going to have to redo throughout the lesson. Looking up here, eyes on me, let's begin. Some kind of cue for attention. I am going to go back and review any critical content necessary for today's lesson. Today, we're going to learn about a topic sentence, but first, let's review the term topic. Okay, so I could go back and review that. Today, we are going to look at equivalent fractions, but let's go back and review the numerator and the denominator. All right, and then we could have a preview telling the students the goal of the lesson and the activities of the lesson. So we have attention, review, preview. And then we have the body of the lesson. Now, that varies a great deal. Maybe I'm teaching a strategy, and I'm going to have I do it, we do it, you do it. Maybe I'm teaching vocabulary, and I'm using a routine like pronunciation, meaning, illustrate with examples, check for understanding. So there'll be some variation in the body of the lesson. But at the close of the lesson, no storm the door. We're going to go back and review. What did we cover today? And we're going to have a preview tomorrow in our next lesson. We're going to, and we might assign independent work. So that just gives us a structure. And We do so much better as teachers if we have a structure in mind. And even here in this teaching, I got your attention at the beginning, and I told you what we were going to cover in our 3 sessions: explicit instruction, intervention for reading and writing. And so I did a little preview. And now we're having a long body as we go through this, totally interactive. And at the end of each of our sessions, I'd better go back and review what we've covered and tell you what we'll do in the next session. Okay, so an opening, a body, and a closing. But the big idea is my lessons are organized and focused. And so then we have, as a design, in addition to organized and focused, and read it with me, begin lessons with a clear statement of the lesson's goals. Now, there are many, many ways that you might convey the goal of the lesson. You might have it written down and they might read it with you. You might post it. You might have them write it on their paper. You might have a learning intention. And I just looked back over 55 years of teaching, and we've called this having an objective, having a behavioral objective, having a target, having a learning intention, having a goal. And what's interesting is I see no comparative studies on which one is better than another. But it does make a difference to tell kids what they are to attend to. Remember, we started with our learning intentions, which included that you would know the 13 different elements of explicit instruction. So some way we need to tell them the goal. And let's just look at how we might polish our practice in terms of the goal. Some people call it the purpose of the lesson. We'd better have clarity. So in this day's session, you're going to learn the 13 elements of explicit instruction. So clarity, and using terminology that the students understand, so it is student friendly. And if the students are involved, they're more likely to attend to the critical information. So for example, if I write down the learning intention or the goal, I want them to attend to it. I might have them read it, or I might ask them a question on it, but I want student involvement. Students and teachers could read it together, or they could ask, teacher could ask questions that they had to respond to. And we would go back in the lesson and revisit it. So right now, our learning intention is to learn 13 elements, and we're on the 4th element, which is telling them the goal of the lesson. And if I walk in your classroom, I should be able to go to a student and not ask them, what are you doing, but what are you learning? And they should say, I'm learning to read words with OA. I'm learning how to write a summary of a short article. I'm learning what are the branches of the federal government. Students should know what they are learning. That's how we could polish up our practice. And remember in that, I get your attention, we have review, and then I have preview, including the goal of the lesson. So let's look at those more intently, like review. And so I'm going to put down on my list number 5, review. So reading it with me, review prior skills and knowledge before beginning instruction. So for example, we're going to read words with OA. I'm going to review the sounds of vowels that are embedded in the words that we're going to read. So I'm going to look at the pre-skills. If I am going to teach you how to change one fraction into an equivalent fraction, then I'm going to review fractions that are equal to 1. So 2/2 equals 1, 3/3 equals 1, 4/4 equals 1, 5/5 equal 1, 100/100 equals 1. So if I multiply that times a fraction, we'll have an equivalent fraction. But first, we have to have down the idea that 2/2 and 100/100, they both equal 1. So I'm going to review information. Now, how might we need to polish that practice? Well, first of all, we need to make that a consistent instructional practice. What do they need to know that they've already been taught that's necessary for today's lesson so I can do a quick review of it? 2, because by doing a quick review, they have the foundation of what we're learning, but also they will be alert to the fact they already know something they can connect the new knowledge to. So that quick review is also making the connection between what we're learning today and what you already know that's in permanent memory. And review needs to involve active involvement with the students. And when possible, when the students have had something more than one time, the best review requires retrieval practice, when they have to retrieve something from memory and get feedback. Now, let me just give you a non-example that I visited. Kindergarten, and we have a number of kindergarten teachers. And so the teacher said, before we sound out words, let's go back and review the sounds. So the teacher had flashcards. All good teachers have flashcards, and the teacher put up a card and said, this is the letter A, its sound is ah. What sound? Ah. Teacher put up the next card and said, this is the letter T, its sound is T. What sound? T. Next flashcard, and went through the sounds that they had already learned and did it with that same routine. But the problem was they'd been taught it before, and but the teacher modeled each one, so it was so heavily scaffolded they didn't have to retrieve it. And looking over here and reading this with me, the power of retrieval practice. When students retrieve and bring information to mind, the mental challenge produces durable long-term learning. So that day when I watched this, I was with a group of instructional leaders, including a principal, and they were writing down best practices, and the principal wrote down excellent review. And later, when we were out in the hallway debriefing, I said, no, the problem was that it was so heavily scaffolded, the review, that the students did not have to retain it. What would have been better is the teacher simply puts up the card that they've already taught, they've already rehearsed, they've done on previous days, and said, get ready, what sound? And the students would hopefully say, if it was an M. And so that the students would retrieve it. Now, if they'd also need feedback, put it up. What sound? Yes. What sound? Yes. T. And if they made an error and the teacher heard errors in the group, the teacher would simply say, this sound is T. What sound? T. And then go back and say, what sound? O. What sound? I. What sound? T. So retrieval practice is particularly useful in review. Okay, I want to knock this one out of the park though, because what we tend to do for review is simply recap what we've covered before versus actual retrieval. So let's look at an example for you. Need a new piece of paper, set it down. Okay. A recap. So we went over the 3 components of a lesson: the opening, the body, and the closing. And we particularly looked at what elements we'd include in the opening. I'd get their attention. And after I got their attention, I'd have review of critical content. And then I'd share with them a preview of what we're going to cover, the goal. Attention, review, preview. And then we looked at the closing, on which we would have a review of the critical content. And then we would have a preview of what we're doing in the next lesson and give them independent work. So let's move on. So I could have done a review that was a recap, but that would not be as powerful as this. There are 3 elements to a lesson. On the paper, you're going to write down the 3 words for the parts of a lesson. Be sure you've left space because we're going to add to it. Write down those. Okay, check yours. Do you have opening, body, and closing? If not, fix yours up. So we looked at the opening of the lesson, and there was 3 parts to it. And so on your paper next to opening, record those 3 words. Okay, feedback. I have attention, review, preview. You might have had goal instead. Attention, review, preview. Now we're going to come to the body later, but write down what might be included in a closing. Okay, feedback. You might have review of the critical content we've covered, preview what we're going to do tomorrow or in the next lesson, and I might assign independent work. So I did a recap review, and then I did a retrieval review, but it's the retrieval practice that nails the long-term learning. So we're going to look at retrieval practice again when we look under the research on practice. Don't forget that. If you want to investigate retrieval practice, I would suggest that you go to the website, www.retrievalpractice.org, retrievalpractice.org. And it's a group of cognitive scientists who do research on retrieval practice, and they have excellent, excellent resources available to you. And the authors of that website also have a book that came out a few years ago called Powerful Teaching. Definitely one to look into. I'll be certain that you have a list of books that might be of use to you. Well, what else might we want in the lesson? Not surprising, we would want in the body of the lesson We might want the teacher to do demonstration, guided practice, checking for understanding, particularly when teaching a strategy. So that the teachers in the research that was done on high leverage teaching, those teachers that taught knew how to do something had demonstrations. And they didn't go to you do it. Instead, they then did guided practice, guided the students in doing it, and then had them do it. So I'm going to write down I do, and we do, and you do, demonstration, guided practice, checking for understanding. Now, tomorrow I'm going to have more demonstrations of I do it, we do it, you do it in regard to reading and writing skills. But I wanted to pick something out that could be useful to many of our teachers, particularly our secondary general ed or special ed teachers. And that is teaching students how to study vocabulary. But first, let's look at what I should do with I do, what I should do with we do, what I should do with you do, that would make a difference. And so what do we want to see in a demonstration? You'll be able to check this out. Did I show you and tell you how to do it? Did I break it down into small steps? Did I exaggerate those steps? Did I have clarity when I modeled it? And did I follow the I do it, the dynamic demonstrations with we do it? Because many teachers go right from I do it to you do it. Not the best plan. I do it, then we do it together. And how about the we do it? So now we are going to do it together. I am going to guide you, and I'm going to do it in small enough steps that you have success. And I'm going to be clear about each step. And I'm going to guide you in applying the strategy. I'm going to say, this is a step, now you do it. This is a step, and now you do it. Step, do, step, do, step, do. That's how we guide students. And I'm going to gradually reduce my help and scaffolding, and there's going to be a release of responsibility to you. And I'm going to continue doing step, do, step, do, step, do, until the majority of my group that I'm teaching are accurate. Because I'm not going to ask them to do it on their own until they demonstrated they can do it accurately. And so here's the problem though. If I'm a general ed teacher and I have demonstrated how to do something very clearly 1 or 2 times, and then I've done with the students 1 example, 2 example, 3 example, 4, almost all of them are looking good, but there's still 5 that aren't quite there. So I do another one where we do it together, and they're not quite there yet. So I do another one, but I still have 3 who can't do it. And so then I'm going to go to you do it, but how would I differentiate at that point for those 3? Well, when I have them do it by themselves, I could be certain to go to those 3 to do focused monitoring and assistance. That's one way to support them. I could pull those 3 out and do a small group where I continue to guide them on the work they are doing. But then that's always a challenge because then I'm not monitoring the rest of the students as well. Or I could also have students work with their partner so that their partners could give them additional input. So we do. So that's a little bit of the we do it polish. Clarity, 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 step two, step two, step two. I'm going to guide you in it with a gradual release of responsibility, followed, if I need to, with some differentiation on giving you additional assistance. And then you're going to do it, right? Check your understanding before you move to total independent work. And within the lesson, I'm going to determine if, do I need, I'm going to constantly check your understanding throughout the lesson. Do I need to adjust this lesson? Do the students need to move to independent practice? Should the information be retaught? Should additional guidance be given? So I'm asking these questions when I check your understanding. Well, we're going to take a tiny break because you need it. So take 5, be back in your seats, and I will do a little example lesson. Oh boy, we've covered so much today, but we still have a little more to cover. So take 5 and put your questions in, and we'll do that right when we return. Okay, so you hear that ring and return to your seats. So Michelle, did we have any new questions emerge?
Yes, there is one, and I apologize. My husband's next to me, so there's some noise. But yes, there is a question in the chat, and it's a great one, asking about if you're differentiating and working with a small group during the we do portion. Does that mean the students who are not, let me read that again. If you're differentiating and working with small groups during the we do portion, does that mean the rest of the group who you are not working with have moved into the I do or independent practice while you continue to scaffold for those who need it?
So that if I pulled off a small group, I went to You Do It to check out the validity of that choice. So at that moment, I found that the majority of students, let's say they did item number 1, they did it correctly, and except for those 3 students. And so then I pulled off that small group and had the others continue. And I might make it so that there's feedback available for them, like after they finish number 10 items, that there is a key that they could check, or they could compare with their partners. And I would, even as I worked with those 3 students, though, I would constantly monitor the class, what we call with itness. I am constantly monitoring them, giving them comments. Excellent, everybody's on task, beautiful. Thank you very much for continuing to work. And then sit back down with my group. So it would be a very intentional act. I've already done I do it, I've done we do it, we do it, we do it, constantly. I'm monitoring, do I need more we do it? Then I do a you do it when I think the majority have learned it. And this is particularly a model in general ed. And then I'm going to have them work independently. And one possibility was pulling it off. But another possibility is simply monitoring and going to the students that are at risk and giving them more immediate assistance, or having them work with a partner. Is that it, Michelle?
That is it for the questions right now.
All right, thank you so much. Well, we just looked at I do it, we do it, you do it. And so I looked at just one example that might be useful to you. And I was actually teaching students in high school how to study their vocabulary. Yes. And so they were in a class, and it was a class where they were studying the vocabulary was from their book that they were learning in statistics. And so I watched them study and knew that they needed some help. So I taught them how to create and study their flashcards. And so I taught them how to find in their book critical content that they needed to learn. And on the front of their flashcard, they would write the content, the concept, so variable in one. And on the back, they would write down a definition, some examples, and other information. And then they'd set up 2 envelopes, studied and mastered. So I actually modeled how to make the cards. So on the front, I looked at this part in their book with them. On the front, I'm writing variable. And in the back, I am writing the concept, variable. I am writing a definition, it's what varies. And I'm writing some examples. You could have low stress, high stress. You could be 33. You could, age could vary. You could be 75. You could be female or male. You could be religion. You could be Christian. You could be Islam faith. You could be Buddhist faith. So it's what varies. So I modeled it. They copied it onto their own. And then we did one together, value. So we found it in the book. So what are we going to write down first? We're going to write the concept and the definition, and we're going to give examples. And so if we have a value, it's either a number that tells the value or a category. For example, we have stress levels from 0 to 4. We could have age from 1 to whatever. We could have gender. We could have religion, and that's a category. And so that would tell its value. So it could be a number. Here was a number. Age was a number. And so then this was something simple to do. So they did the next one themselves. They had to add the information to the back that they needed to study. For score, it's the person's value on a variable. So I'm 75. So the variable is age and my value is 75. And stress is the variable, and it can vary from 0 to 4. And because I have a manuscript that is due tomorrow, maybe it's a 3. So that would be its value. So I led them with, I do it, modeled how to make a card, we do it together, and then you do it. But I want you to notice, so often we just assume aside. We assume that these students, we say, make flashcards to study your vocabulary. And we have not modeled it. We have not guided them in doing one. We've not then had them follow it up. So even something that's simple like this really profits from, I do it, we do it, you do it. But that didn't end there. I needed to teach them how to study with their flashcards. And so I taught them that they needed to look at the front, read the concept. Don't turn the card over, no. Instead, retrieve information. Say the meaning of it, give yourself some examples and other information that you needed to remember. Then check, turn it over and check it. And on the card, record if you got it right, a plus, or if you left something out and need to continue to study it, a minus. Go back here for a moment. And when you have 3 pluses, then you're going to put it in the mastered envelope. Okay, so why? Well, why did I need to teach this? Because retrieval, again, is the most important thing they could do for study. And that they're going to read the concept, they're going to try to retrieve as much information as possible, and then they're going to turn it over and check. Versus just continually read the concept, read the information, read the concept, read the information. That is not going to lead to it sticking to long-term memory. But I needed to then actually demonstrate this. And so I said, my turn. First step is to read the concept. So the concept is variable. And I'm not going to turn it over yet. I'm going to retrieve the information. A variable is something that varies. Okay, and so it's simply something that varies. So age could vary, stress could vary. Let's see, other examples of things that could vary that we might be looking at. Another thing could vary is their religion, their gender could vary, their height could vary, their weight could vary. Oh, there's so many things that could vary, and that would be a variable, remembered by vary, able to vary, able to vary. And then I would turn over and check it. Okay, well, I did really well. What varies? Oh, able to vary. And I gave some examples like stress and age and gender and religion. I added things like weight and height. Good job, Archer. And I gave myself a plus. Yay, yay. So I modeled it. I did it step by step. I exaggerated it as I modeled it. I'm not committing a suicide, assuming they get it right away, but modeling it. And then we would do it together, or we do it. What do we do first? Yes, we read the concept. What is it? Value. Don't turn the card over. Say to yourself the critical information, the definition, the examples, and what else you need to remember about it for value. Turn my card over here. So, okay, so you say it to yourself. What do you do next? After you retrieve it, you check it. Yes, turn it over and let's check it out. And so I'm guiding them step by step through how to study. And then I have them do one on their own. They've already made the card for a score and studied it. So now I'm going to study it with retrieval practice. And I have them check themselves out and give themselves a plus or a minus. I do it, we do it, you do it. Used to set up the cards, used to learn how to do the strategy to go with it. Okay, so we have looked at the actual design of the lesson, organized and focused. We're going to state the goal. We're going to have review, particularly with retrieval practice. And then we're going to, if it's a strategy, have I do it, we do it, you do it. But I will tell you, the I do it, we do it, you do it, maybe over a course of a number of days, particularly if what I'm teaching you is complex. Like when that example, I was teaching you how to write a topic sentence. Oh, that might take a number of days to get down a topic sentence. So it might be, I do it, I do it. We do it, 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 we do it. Gradual release of responsibility, you do it. Okay, so, but I will tell you again and again, what I see as the challenge is actually often the delivery. And so we have looked at content, we have looked at design, but now we're going to look at some critical elements of delivery. And the first one, read it with me, request frequent responses. This is basically the opportunities to respond, which has a very high effect size. Remember, in the review of the high leverage practices that came out of CEC, and we're going to give you the manual in case you don't have it, they found that explicit instruction and opportunities to respond had the most research and the best effect sizes. It makes a difference. We saw it in that little lesson that we watched of how critical it was that the students had opportunities to respond. And my models that go with this, I've done some recent presentations called Learning is Not a Spectator Sport. If you want to just watch one recording on opportunities to respond, go to Voyager Sopris. I did it for one of my publishers, and it's available to you. And a good friend of mine, Kevin Feldman, who's worked with me over many years, does a lot of work with secondary and on opportunities to respond. And their motto is, everyone does everything. Everyone does everything. Not raised hands, where just one kid's doing it. Everybody's thinking about it. Everybody is writing it down. Everybody's sharing it with their partner. Everybody is writing it. Everyone does everything. So it is time for another little video. And in this video, you need paper again, because you're going to write down what are the best practices. And I decided to show one where I'm actually teaching students how to be participants in my middle school class. Basically what you'd be doing on the first day of a class. But we're going to see here, not only how you might teach them to participate, which is critical, but also how even as you taught things like your rules and your routines in a class, how active participation is necessary. So this was a group of students that I was teaching in middle school in a suburb of Portland, Oregon, in Beaverton. So let me just pull up that video. And Michelle, let me know if you can see that.
We can see it.
All right, so your job, again, I'm going to take data on opportunities to respond, and Michelle, you're going to do the same so we can compare, okay? And rest of you, you can have a choice. You could count opportunities to respond, and then you'll put that in the chat box. I'll tell you when 10 minutes are up, so you could easily figure out number per minute. Or you can write down high leverage practices, or do both, okay? So you're going to write something down though, because you're going to put it in the chat box when we're done. Okay.
So we're going to learn the words for the next.
Except we do not need to see that video again. So stop share, my fault. Let's pull up this video. Get rid of that one. You're very patient with me. Thank you.
Well, by the time you've been in seventh grade, you've had lots of teachers.
So right away, you're going to be able to tell this was not recent because you can see that I'm using an overhead projector. But good instruction, even across time. Oh no, don't tell me I got rid of that. Okay, Michelle, verify if you can see.
I need to take a moment
Yes,
to teach you
we
how
can
to
see.
Yes, good.
my students. And when I teach seventh graders, I expect them to follow through with a strategy called what, everyone? SLANT. And what SLANT does, it summarizes what you need to do in class. And S stands for what, everyone? Sit up. So I need everybody sitting up. Now, there's a reason for that. As soon as you sit up, you are much more likely to be a learner, much more likely to be present. And I look out at you and I think, oh, gifted one. Ooh, really brilliant. Ooh, definitely brilliant. So just doing that sends a message to your teacher that you're present, you're ready to learn, and you're very smart. L stands for what, everyone? Listen. Of course, I expect you to listen to me, but also to your peers in class. And A stands for two things. First is what, everyone? Ask and also answer. So in seventh grade, there's two kinds of questions you might have. If the question is what I call a public question, where the answer is helpful to everyone in the room, then raise your hand high and I'll call on you during the lesson because the answer would help everyone. Questions such as maybe you want me to define a word. That would be an excellent public question. Or maybe you're not sure of the page number. That would be a great public question. So everybody show me public question. Raising your hand, raising your hand. Okay, good. And however, if you have a private question such as, can I sharpen my pencil? Can I go to the restroom? Can I get a drink of water? Of course, as seventh graders, you'd never interrupt the lesson with those questions, but just put your hand on your heart and I will come to you privately to respond to that. Okay, so get ready to show me public or private. I am teaching a lesson and you want me to explain the directions again. Show me public or private. I definitely think that's public because if she doesn't understand the directions, someone else doesn't, hands down. I am teaching a lesson and you want to know if Friday will be a long day or a shortened day. And show me what that definitely, we wouldn't interrupt the lesson for that, though everybody might be interested. Put your hands down. So I'm teaching a lesson and I gave some directions that were very confusing. And so if she wanted them explained, show me if it would be public or private. Public, excellent. Well, that's why you're seventh graders. You got that significantly faster than any group today. Give yourself a tally mark. So answer, what does that mean? Well, here's what it doesn't mean. When I teach and I ask a question, in my class, students don't raise their hands. So when I ask a question, you will not raise your hand. I know that seems un-American, probably un-Oregonian, but we're not going to raise our hands. We're going to do some other things instead. One thing we're going to do is when the answers are short, we're going to say the answers together. Now, I noticed that a number of you are in band. Raise your hand if you are taking band. Excellent. I'm very impressed. Wonderful. I might have to come over, bring my clarinet and come to band class. But you know how your orchestra or band director directs you. And that's exactly what I'm going to do here. Here's how I'm going to direct you. I'll ask a question. I'll put up my hands. This says think, don't say anything. And then when I lower my hands right there, you'll say the answer. So for example, everybody, what month is it? It is December. Now remember, this is think, and sometimes it might be up there for a while. And the day of the week today is?
Monday.
Perfect. You got it right away. Give yourself a tally mark for getting that instantly. Many times you are going to say answers to partners, and I'm going to give you a partner. And I expect no matter who your partner is, as a learning community, you will be very kind to them. And 1, 2 partners, 1, 2 partners, 1, 2 partners. And 1, 2 partners, 1, 2 partners, 1, 2 partners. And over here, 1, 2 partners, 1, 2 partners, 1, 2, and 1, 2 partners, and 1, 2. Now, the reason I put you here is we have an odd number and you are a 1 and they're both 2s. So you're going to have to listen to both of them. Okay, so everybody turn and stare at your partner. Raise your hand if your number is 1. Good. Raise your hand if you're a 2. Raise your hand if you're a 1. Raise your hand if you're a 1. All right. So, and if I had the gift of having this partner, I would look at my partner, lean a little towards my partner, and whisper. Look, lean, whisper. Say it, everybody. Look, lean, whisper. And 1s, pretend you're saying an answer to a partner. Show me what you look like. Looking, leaning, whispering. Excellent. Oh, my JC. Thanks. And oh, excellent job. Perfect. Excellent. All right. Well, so A stands for both. Ask and what, everyone? Answer. And N stands for 2 things in 7th grade. And the first one is what, everyone? Not. Here is the secret. You do it well. The secret of being a brilliant student is when you understand something or you agree with the teacher, you give a little intelligent nod. Let me see it. Okay? See, the teacher's looking at, oh gosh, so attentive, so gifted, who's so smart. Now, you don't want to spend the whole period. Just a little nod here and a little nod there. And this takes you right into college. So you're listening to that prof, give me an intelligent nod. They're thinking you're so smart. And as 7th graders, sometimes, and we'll do it in this lesson, you might write something down. You might take a, what, everyone, a note. Last thing, T is for what, everyone? Track. This just means that you need to keep track of the teacher. So if I'm speaking and I'm here, your eyes are perfectly on me. Excellent, JC. If I walk over this way, your eyes are again on me. Excellent. So you keep track of the teacher. Well, I want you to take a moment and look this over, because in a moment, either ones or twos, you won't know which one, are going to have to tell your partner what each letter stands for. So give it a little study.
So rehearsal of the information.
Okay, ones. Without peeking, tell your partner what each letter stands for.
Retrieval. So rehearsal and retrieval. If I want you to gain knowledge, rehearsal and retrieval.
Twos. If they miss one, help them out. Go.
Listen.
Excellent.
L is listen.
Excellent.
N is
Beautiful.
N equals to notes and nod
Perfect.
and
Excellence over here. Good. Okay, eyes up here. Let's see if everybody has it. S is for what, everyone? Sit up. L is for listen. Perfect. A is for ask and answer. Excellent. N is for nod and no. And T is for track. Now, if you begin to like slump down because it's in the day, I'll just say, give me a little slant, and you'll know that you need to sit up, listen, ask and answer, nod and note and track.
Okay, so your job right now is to think about your best practices and also think about the number, and that was 7 minutes. And so think about the number per minute.
Anita, while we're doing this, there is a question about what were the tally marks being used for in your video?
I will be glad to tell them about that because there was a purpose. Okay, so if you did opportunities to respond and you had 7 minutes, put in the number per minute, say so many per minute. If you noticed a good practice, add that to the chat box. Okay, so let me pull up the chat here and see what you had. And okay, and so yes, there was a question here. Are the slides going to be available? And Michelle, are those already posted?
Everyone who is a paid registrant received them this morning in an email.
All right, excellent. So, okay, so in terms of good practices, let me just go up here a minute. We'll hit some of these. You're actually very observant. Tanya said she really liked public and private question as a routine. Boy, let me tell you, if you're middle school or if you teach 4th or 5th grade, it's an excellent practice because sometimes students are asking private questions publicly and adding to a distraction, an interruption to our lesson. They're not thinking about the critical content, they're thinking about that question. and teaching them also to follow the teacher, as Rochelle wrote down, was important as another part of that. And let's see what other things that we had. Probably won't hit all of them, but some of them. Kristen said, look around, walk around, is exactly what I did when I monitored. And they rehearsed it, and then they had retrieval practice. And Carrie said, retrieval of the information, going beyond just giving it to them, but having them get it out. And it is the getting out cognitively that increases the probability of retention. Megan said there was frequent monitoring within the lesson, and there was reinforcement to the students, and there was feedback and lots of repeated practice. And Megan said that there were very clear expectations in terms of saying answers when I gave them the signal. The teacher stayed in her teaching arena, good noticing. And Patrick said there was monitoring and feedback. And Megan said there was clear expectations, rehearsal and retrieval. Beautiful job. So 3.3 per minute. Now, so Lori, I actually got 5 per minute, but I bet what you did is you counted academic responses, and I also counted academic responses as well as behavioral responses, looking up here, sitting up. And so we probably were totally on the right track, but either way, 3.3 or 5 per minute would meet our goal of 3 to 5 responses per minute. So terrific job. So we'll make this available so that if you wanted to use this video, that you'd be able to. Michelle and I'll tell you tomorrow how we're going to do that. Okay, so thank you for putting things in the chat. And let me just get I close my chat so that I can see you, and we're back to business. I gave you very lengthy feedback on the slides in case you wanted to pull some of this out on your first day of school to introduce to students how they're going to participate in your class. So I put down as glows that they were prepared. I was prepared. I was passionate about what I taught. I was very present. I even used humor. You might have missed the humor. I had a perky pace, a positive environment, and clarity in terms of clear directions, clear expectations, clear demonstrations. And I told them the goal of the lesson. And then I told them why we were going to learn slant, which is an excellent strategy. I made some mild modifications in it. It came out of University of Kansas research. Sit up, listen, ask and answer, nod and note, and track. And then I introduced each part of it where I gave them the information and a rationale. And we listen and we ask, and that's where the public and private came in. Public questions if it's useful to everyone, private questions hand on heart because it's just for you. And I introduced to them that we weren't going to have volunteers, so we wouldn't raise our hands when I asked a question. And then I taught them choral responses. Always useful to tie it to something that they're familiar with. They'd just come from bands, so many of them were band members. So I made that analogy, and that they were going to think and then they were going to say. And then we went, I assigned the partners, gave them numbers so I could say, 1's tell your partner, 2's tell your partner. I told them that they would look, lean, and whisper when they worked with partners. And then I had them demonstrate partners. And we went through nod and note and track. But then I had them retrieve it. So they had to, without seeing all of the words, they had to use SLA and T to tell it to their partners. Okay, and there were opportunities to respond. So interestingly enough, so this was another time I took data, and this was 4.12, and I had this time 5 per minute. Now I got to relook at it and get it, but it's still right in the ballpark of woo-woo, many opportunities to respond. Even as I taught them how to be my students, I want them to know from the first day of school that everyone does everything, that learning is not a spectator sport. So we had choral responses, we had partner responses, we had gestures, and I monitored their responses and gave them feedback to the whole class and individuals as I circulated. Now, grows. If you noticed, the room arrangement is a challenge in this classroom. The teacher has 2 rows facing each other. But if you wanted to monitor in the classroom, the kids in the second row, you're going to have to walk all the way down and back behind them. You probably didn't even notice half of the students that were there. So I met with the teacher after school. And actually, when I go to schools and do demonstrations after school, I say, we can do a feng shui visit. If you want to look at your room arrangement and get feedback, meet me here and we'll go on a walk, and which we did. We had about 20 teachers who wanted me to go to their classrooms. But in this classroom, I suggested that the students who are in the back, because you couldn't monitor them or see them with ease, they're going to be less attentive and less connected to you. So I said, let's consider rearranging where they're facing the front of the room and you're in a teaching arena. Or you could create a way to get to the back row. And the teacher said, I like that because I like them. We have a lot of debates. I like them facing each other. So we simply moved the students away from the very ones close to the board, moved them back so the teacher could go either in the front or at the end of the line to the back. But then we added to it. We did this every Monday: back row, front row, back. Next Monday, back row, front row, back. So everybody every other week had their week in the front row, just in case the teacher gave more attention. So excellent job looking at the video, and our day is going so fast. So the first one, going back to our critical elements on delivery, is frequent responses. So for number 9, I'm adding frequent responses. And I've emphasized this again and again: explicit instruction, opportunities to respond, highest effect sizes for making a difference, particularly in the review of the high leverage practices in special ed. And what are the benefits? Well, we could see it in both the 5th grade group we watched and the middle school group, that as the responses go up, so does on-task behavior. As the responses go up, so does learning. That's what we're there for. As the responses go up, inappropriate behavior goes down. One of the best management tools you could utilize is increasing opportunities to respond, because it's hard to be responding actively and also engage in disruptive behavior. And when you look at how to intensify intervention, it is to do one thing would be to increase opportunities to respond. Now, some meta-analysis have even given us some advice. And so one question was what should be the blend of everyone does it and calling on individuals, not volunteers, however, no volunteers, no volunteers. And so I looked at two groups of studies, two meta-analyses done at very different times, but they had almost exactly the same suggestions. That when they looked at expert teachers who got the most in terms of learning, the highest percentage of responses were unison. Everybody says it, everybody writes it, everybody does it. The much lower percentage was for calling on individual students, not on volunteers, but calling as a follow-up on individual students. Now, we could even make this stronger though by everybody writes it down and then I call on you. Or everybody says an answer to the partner, then I call on you. So everybody's done everything, though I might check with some individuals. They've even given us an idea of, and this has to be used as loose guidelines about how many responses they might want you to make. And so if the responses are fairly simple, everybody says it together, everybody gestures, everybody holds up a response card, everybody holds up fingers, that those very effective teachers had 3 to 5 opportunities to respond per minute. Now, the two videos that we watched, one had about 7 per minute, and this one somewhere between 3 to 5 opportunities to respond would meet this criteria. If it is more complex responses, so I'm having the students give long explanations to their partners, or they have to make written responses, have to write out answers, or they have their slate out and they're writing a math problem on it. Still, those very effective teachers elicited about 1 opportunity to respond per minute. So it's not 1 per period. It's not 1 per hour. It still is frequent responses. And when the responses were very complex, write a summary of this passage. Even there was at least 1 opportunity to respond every 10 to 30 minutes. So no matter what, don't you wish your college classes had more opportunities to respond? We can do it remotely, lessons have more responses. I'm trying to model that as we go. But in our classrooms, we can definitely get data to see if ours are meeting what we know as sort of guidelines, loose guidelines, but guidelines of effective teachers. Okay, and so some things about opportunities to respond. And this comes from watching 150 teachers' lessons in the last 2 years. I was totally blessed. But some teachers would start by asking a question. Do any of you know how to change a fraction to an equivalent fraction? Does anybody know what the 3 branches of the federal government are? Does anybody know the meaning of this word? So the teachers would start often by asking a question. But teaching before you asking is a much better practice, because if you ask first, you might have incorrect information that's given. And now everybody has heard that. You might have incomplete information that is shared. If you ask first and the person gives a brilliant answer, you might assume that everybody in the class has brilliant answer, making the wrong assumption. Teach, then ask. Teach, then ask. So let me just share with you a true example. So the teacher says, can anyone tell me the meaning of the word precipitation? And the first student that's called on said, well, that's something that's under your arms. Okay, you can see how they made an error there. I called on the next one. Precipitation, that is like something that you sip or something you drink is precipitation. So now the students have heard two totally incomplete answers. And if they don't have a lot of background knowledge, then they could actually be learning inaccurate information. So much better to teach first, then ask. So it might go something like this. This word is precipitation. What word? Precipitation. Put your hand on your desk. Do it, everyone. Tap and say the syllables in precipitation. Precipitation. Again, precipitation. What word? Precipitation. Yes. When rain or snow or hail falls to the ground, it's called precipitation. And it has to come naturally, not when the sprinkler is on. When it comes, rain is called what? Precipitation. Snow is called precipitation. Hail is called precipitation. Now everybody knows precipitation. So this is the little chart of the different ways that we could get responses from students. And this is for my own information to go into tomorrow. Would you put into the chat box, the three most common ones that you utilize. Now you're going to look over this and you're going to say, well, I always use choral responses and partners, but I also use touching in my special ed class. Put your top three in the chat box, and then I'm going to get a copy of the chat and I'll review that for tomorrow. Okay, as you're doing that, this is a reminder. You might say, oh, I use choral responses, but what do I need to do to polish up that practice? I use partners. What do I need to do to polish up that practice? I use gestures. What do I need to do to polish up those practice? So in our remaining time, that's what we're going to look at, is how you might polish those up. So I picked out the ones I'm anticipating you might have and what to do to polish them. So you call on choral responses, as we did in both of those videos. And you use it when the answers are what? Short and the same. And you have to have a signal for it. And this is where, if I just allow them to burst out with their answers, and I don't have a signal, then they won't say it together. It'd be like the band director coming in, take out this piece of music, begin. Well, it would not be beautiful music. The band teacher knows that they need signals to keep them together. And we need signals to be certain that the responses are being said together. If they're short and the same, and I want them to say it together, they need a signal. And it could be the one I used in the video. Think and say. Think and say. It could be simply an auditory, everyone, and on the downbeat, they say it. It could be an audible one. So I was in a school where the teacher was doing decoding and had a clicker and clicked it, or any other kind of audible signal. I was at a small group lesson in intervention, and the teacher would say, everyone, everyone. And right there, everybody said it. Right there, everybody said it. Right there, everybody said it. They couldn't just mimic someone else. Right there, they had to say it. If you have some students who don't respond, what should you do? Nagging never works very well. What you might simply do is have a very gentle redo. Ooh, but I need everyone. Oh, double darn it, I still don't have everyone. I need everyone. Woo, I need everyone. So frequent responses could be unison responses, but again, got to polish up the practice. We could have partners, but we're not just going to use, oh, turn and talk, turn and talk. When the answers are long and different, and if I have enough students to have partners, so I've got to have 4 or more, or I can't use partners, I've got to structure it. So I'm going to assign partners, give them some kind of designation, 1s and 2s, A and B. But this one's important, giving jobs to both of them. Now, when we did slant, I said 1s first. Tell your partner what each of the letters mean. Now 2s, tell your partner what each of them mean. But I've done lessons where I would say, tell your partner the answer. Now partners, tell them if you agree or disagree and why. And remember in the video, I taught them to look at their partner, lean towards their partner, and whisper. And we would change the partners. In every study we looked at, between 3 to 6 weeks, they changed the partners. Not daily, not every time they came into my resource room, but after a few weeks. So we got to polish up our partners. We could have a discussion. So maybe I am that language arts teacher who's with us today in 7th grade. And we're going to have discussion of what we've read as a whole class. Whoa, I better polish that one up. So I've got a good question or a good prompt. I structure it. So I present the prompt to the students. And then I have everybody write down their talking points. Because the main problem with discussions is not everybody participates. So everybody's going to write down notes for their answers. And then I'm going to have them share their talking points with a partner. So if I don't have any ideas, I can pick up a few from my partner. And then we're going to discuss it. The 2 important things here to polish it up is have them write down their talking points. So everyone does everything. Have them share with their partner so that everyone does everything. And now I've set them up for much more success for participation in a discussion. Individual responses. Am I going to call on kids raising their hands? You want to reduce that number. The first thing that I taught those students was no hand raised. If I ask a question, we might say it together. You might write it down. You might say it to your partner. I might call randomly on individuals. No hands raised. So I'm limiting the number of volunteers. Occasionally, I might use volunteers for a specific question where I don't expect everyone to have the answer because it's based on their own personal background knowledge. But most of the time, no, no, no. I have some kind of randomization tool. Maybe I have names that I draw, sticks that I draw, and call on that student. Could be cards that I draw and call on them. Maybe I have their names listed. And when I randomly call on a student, I note it. I put a check after their name. So then I look, the next time, look down the list and randomly call on someone. Maybe I have a randomization hop on my phone and I call on them. But this is the procedure that I would substitute with calling on volunteers. I ask a question. I give them a chance to prepare the answer, and I often even give them a sentence stem. So if I ask the question, what are the 3 branches of the federal government? The stem might be, the 3 branches of the federal government are. And then I'm going to have them share with their partner. Everyone does it. And then I'm going to call on a student randomly, drawing a stick, drawing a card, checking my app for a name to come up. And they're going to share, but I often make it safe, like they could ask their partner to help them out. Okay, so I can polish up even calling on individuals. Holdups. We could hold up our slate. We could hold up our fingers. We could hold up our response cards. We could hold up our response sheet. This is like the one that I'm going to send you that's fancy, but I could just have kids make one too and use it. The holdups, though, for all of these situations, here's the major error. Teacher asks the questions and then let them immediately put up their fingers, their response card, their response sheet, and they just simply copy someone else. Not good. We ask the question, we have them touch the answer, put down their fingers, or write it on their slate. The teacher then says, show me, they put it up, then we monitor it. So even something like holdups, we've got to polish up to good practice. They hold it up, and of course, we give feedback. Well, so in other words, I just went through the major ways that teachers involve students. We can polish those up a bit. Number 10, we saw it on both videos. We monitor them. We listen carefully. We look carefully at their responding. And how do we polish it up? We listen carefully. We look carefully. In some cases, we're going to circulate. The rest of the time, we're in our teaching arena, but we might move out and circulate. And when we circulate, we might attend particularly to struggling students so that they're getting more feedback. But we're going to monitor all students. And we do it for a number of reasons. If I move out and monitor, I can respond to their academic responses. But also, if I'm monitoring, I can check to be certain they understand the task. Maybe I wasn't clear and they don't understand what they're supposed to do. If I monitor, it's just like a policeman patrolling my neighborhood. It increases the correct behavior in the neighborhood. Same in the classroom. But I'm also monitoring to see if they have finished up the task. Because I want to monitor and say, oh, they're done. I want to return to my teaching arena and regain their attention. And of course, I'm going to adjust the lesson. I'm monitoring and an error is made. I'm going to have to correct that error. I'm monitoring and I think, oh, they're going to need more practice. I'm going to give them more practice. So, you know, it's as teachers, we have to be so present every time we're teaching, because from that monitoring, we're getting information that can direct our behavior. All right, delivery, we give feedback. And so I'm going to add that. We give feedback. And it could be affirmative. Excellent. You added punctuation at the end of each of your sentences. Wow, your topic sentence tells me exactly what the paragraph is about. Excellent job. All those words were accurate, perfect. Affirmative. It could be informative. For example, maybe I'm out monitoring your writing. And for one student, I give informative feedback. So one thing that would help out in terms of how someone's able to read this, your legibility would be critical. And one thing you could do is write on the lines. That would make a difference. I moved to the next student and gave them affirmative feedback, but I could also give that person different informative feedback. So when I read your paragraph, you had a topic sentence, all the details told more about the topic sentence. Now we've been studying transitions, and so I want you to reread it and see if you could add maybe 1 or 2 transition words that would make it easier for the author's cognition. All right. So what are you going to add? Right, transition words. So informative feedback might differ from student to student to student. Or if there's only one answer, then I'm going to do corrections. But feedback. My motto is on feedback, it feeds forward. Feedback feeds forward. It tells you what to do next time. If it's affirmative, got to continue that. Informative, got to improve that. Corrective, got to make that correct. It feeds forward. So feedback. How do you polish this? Well, you give them feedback. You provide it, and it's clear. And in some cases, you can do it to the whole group. Watch me solve this equation. So the feedback's done to everyone. Or if I'm circulating, I can give feedback to individuals. I'm not just walking around. No, I am looking at your work. Walk around, look around, talk around. I'm looking at your work and I am giving you feedback. And it's quiet and private. Nobody else needs to know in the classroom. It's for you. And informative feedback. So it tells you how you can make your response better. It has to be clear. And it has to be based on what I've taught you. So I'm connecting it to what you already know. Sometimes I see people giving informative feedback on things they've never even taught. So a teacher came up to someone whose written product is here and said, wow, let me just tell you, we've not really gone over this. I've not taught you this, but I think it might help. I think it might be really interesting for you. So you could add a positive. And after that noun, you could add, you'd have to put a comma, then you could add a positive that told more about it. The problem there is, the kid said, oh God, we haven't even learned that. And now that's what I'm getting as feedback. I'm trying to do so much better on the things that we've actually been taught. Remember, instruction is more powerful than feedback. Teach it and then give feedback on its performance. You have affirmative feedback. All of us do better when we're acknowledged for what we did well. I could give it to the whole group. Excellent job. All of you added more details to your paragraphs that I read last night. You really are enhancing it by adding more details. And it could be about behavior or academics. And as I monitor, I give feedback to individuals. But instead of just saying, ooh, good job, I could say, excellent. All your punctuation is in the paragraph. I make it specific praise. I go to the next student, wow, excellent job. They're thinking, well, what was excellent about it? Every sentence was in logical order, specific praise, and corrections. All right, get ready for this one. New information for corrections, and we're going to wrap it up there. And that is, some recent studies have found that if students make an error, it's useful to immediately tell them the correct response have them repeat it, and then redo the original question or item with them. This is important because even I have taught people, if the students make an error, then do it with them, take them to the correct answer. But in this study, they compared the two and found that it was significantly better if the students knew where they were going by telling them the answer and then saying, let's redo that item. So they have done as a class an equation, but many of the students got it wrong. So the teacher says the answer was 79. Now, what is the answer? 79. Now let's do it together. Or the students are decoding a word and they mispronounce it. Instead of guiding them to the pronunciation, the teacher says, that word was, what word? Now let's sound it out together. Well, just to round off our time together, we know about a brisk pace. So you can write brisk pace or a perky pace. And basically, perky, not pokey, we saw it in the two videos. And these are the things that make a difference: being prepared, moving along, having routines, avoiding digressions. And the practice one, we're simply going to write down adequate practice, judicious practice. Well, in South Dakota right now, it says we should be done. But you have one task left today before we leave. And that is, would you look over all of your notes? And really important for me to get feedback. Put in what was your biggest takeaways from today. So before you leave, this is your exit ticket to add. What were your takeaways today that you could immediately polish up your own practice with? And in your notes, there is a summary. I'm just skipping ahead of what we went through today. And I want you to study it overnight, because the first thing we're going to do in the morning is retrieval practice for 2 minutes, writing down critical content broken down, organize and focus, state the goal, have review, I do it, we do it, you do it, have frequent responses, monitor the responses, give feedback, have a perky pace, and adequate practice. All right, Michelle, you're back with us as they're adding their very best practices from today in the chat box. And so what message do you have for them?
Well, I am going to stop the recording right now.